So what I'm going to do for the next 15 minutes to look at the energy challenge for us, for the world, look at the energy mix that is being projected, forecasted for the coming 20 to 30 years, look at the role of coal, and then set the agenda for coal meeting that we are organizing for the next 2 days here. Now, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, it's quite clear that in every scenario that you look at, world energy demand is not going down. World energy demand was 6,000 million tons of oil equivalent in 1975. We are at double that amount today, about 12,000 million tons of oil equivalent. In most new policy scenario, it's going to be 16, 17,000 by 2035, maybe about 18,000 million tons of oil equivalent by 2040. It's going to increase by about 1% every year globally. China maybe 2%, India 3%, developed world about 0.2%. Every country in the world is going to need more energy, and the growth in energy is going to take place. The only thing that is going to happen if we invest a lot in energy efficiency, that the rate of growth is going to come down. But still, if you look at 2040, we still will be living in a world with high energy inequality. This is a very interesting chart that came out in World Energy Outlook 2014, and it essentially tells us that our GDP for non-OECD countries will be similar to OECD countries of 1971. So, non-OECD countries' GDP in 2040 will be similar to OECD GDP in per capita GDP in 1971, but our energy will be less than half of what OECD countries consumed in 1971. In 2040, the OECD countries will continue to use more than double the per capita energy than what non-OECD countries will use. But this chart also tells us something very interesting, that the energy intensity of GDP in our part of the world is going to improve significantly. The energy intensity of GDP in OECD countries is also going to improve significantly over the next 3 decades. What about energy mix? You know, in Paris, more than 180 countries have pledged what they are going to do for climate change. Many countries have pledged renewable energy. Now, this is what is currently the energy mix for the world. About 29% of primary energy comes from coal, 31% from gas, 31% from oil, 21% from gas. Nuclear and renewables contributes about 19% presently. What happens in 2040 is 1/4, 1/4, 1/4. Coal will be about 24%. We are looking at oil as 26%, 25, 26%, gas 24%, renewable and nuclear at again 25%, 26%. So, despite all the investments that we are going to make in renewable energy, and we need to make more and more investments in renewable energy and energy efficiency, coal will still remain a significant part of energy mix in 2040. What about electricity? Now, it depends on whether you have gas or not, frankly. US, 38% from coal, 30% from gas. Gas, coal, about 68% of electricity comes from gas and coal in the US. Look at China, 72% from coal, 2% from gas, 74% from gas and coal. India, 76% from gas and coal. Germany is still building coal-based power plant. In fact, in the last 3 years, about 7 gigawatt of new capacity was added in Germany. Japan has started building up has started giving permission for new coal-based power plants. So across the world, we do see, not only in our part of the world, and in our part of the world, we will build more coal-based power plants, but also in developed world, coal will remain an important part of electricity sector. And therefore, if you look at future, coal, which presently provides about 42% of electricity, the proportion is going to reduce. By 2040, coal will contribute about 31% of 31% of total electricity. But in absolute terms, the role of coal is going to increase further. In 2012, coal produced about 42% of electricity, as I said, which is about 9,000 terawatt hour. in 2040, when it reduces to 30%, it will produce about 12,000 terawatt hour. So we will be producing more electricity from coal by 2040. The same trend is there in China, other than the US, where in 2040, it will have less coal, but still about 1,000 terawatt hour of electricity will come from coal in the US in 2040. So we will install new as well as replace old coal-based power plants. In fact, going forward from now, the world is likely to install about 13 to 14,000 gigawatts of coal-based power plant, which will mean an additional 700 gigawatts of new plants and replacement of about 600 gigawatts of old plants. 1360. And in 2040, we will have about 2,630 gigawatts of coal-based power plant. What this chart tells you is that the 50% of the coal-based power plants that will be producing electricity in 2040 is still to be built. That's a huge opportunity. 2040, 2,630 gigawatt, we will be building 1,360 gigawatt in next 25 years. Obviously, we will be building in our part of the world. China is likely to add another 500 to 600 gigawatts, India 150 to 200 gigawatts, Indonesia 50 to 60, not very clear about South Africa. But what this tells you is, of the 1,360 gigawatt that the world is going to add on coal, about 50 to 60% will happen in our part of the world. And about 65% of coal will also be produced in our part of the world. So if you look at 2012, about 65% of coal was produced in China, India, Indonesia, and South Africa. That proportion remains same in 2040. So, what is the environmental implications of this? Now, we haven't studied the environmental implications from different parts of the world, but we did study environmental implications of coal-based power plant in India in 2012, when we did an environmental rating of our coal sector, coal power sector, which was released last year. Now, in 2012, we had capacity of about 115 gigawatt, produced about 620 terawatt hour of electricity. Coal-based power plant consumed 65% of total fresh water that was withdrawn by the industrial sector in India. 2/3 of all the fresh water used by industries was used by coal-based power plants. Coal-based power plants, the land intensity, the land was about 250,000 hectares, both for plant and coal mining. And if you look at pollution, about 60% of all the PM particulate emissions from industrial sector came from coal-based power plants. 45 to 50% of sulfur dioxide emissions came from coal-based power plant. 30% of nitrogen oxide came from coal-based power plant. About 80% of mercury emissions from coal-based power plant. That was 2012, and we should be looking at 2040. Now, governments are acting. China has announced a cap on annual coal consumption to about 4 billion tons by 2020. It has also announced a policy not to build new coal power plants after 2030. It has strict standards. It has shuttered old and small power plants. India has recently enacted strict pollution norms for coal-based power plants. We have ambitious non-fossil target. We have clean energy cess. South Africa is thinking about putting carbon tax starting from 2017. Indonesia is planning to enact strict pollution norms. We will discuss these things. We will get more details in the coming 2 days. So, if that is the case, then what is the future of coal? Are these policies going to be sufficient, or do we need new policies? Do we need new policy roadmap? Do we need new roadmap for regulations? Do we need new roadmap for technology? Now, in next 2 days, we will discuss policy, we will discuss regulations, we are going to discuss technology. Now, I just want to end by giving you the opportunities that exist today. This is the fleet characteristic of coal-based power plants in China, India, South Africa, and Japan. China obviously has moved ahead on technology. It is installing more and more supercritical and ultra supercritical power plants. India, we have begun to install supercritical technology. South Africa just started. Japan much ahead in terms of fleet modernization. They have more of supercritical and ultra supercritical technology. There is an opportunity. We need to discuss what will be the technology roadmap. Will this technology of subcritical, supercritical, and ultra-supercritical going to be sufficient to meet the environmental challenges of 2040? I think that's something that we should discuss in next 2 days. Let me end by saying that why we have organized this meeting. And there was a reason behind organizing this meeting, and that was that in the run-up to the Paris Climate Conference, there was a lot of heat on coal. There was international campaign against coal. It did two things. First, it increased our awareness on renewable and need to invest in renewable and energy efficiency, which is very good, but it did also something bad. What it did was, it made our governments very defensive on coal. Now, defensiveness of government on coal meant that there was less debate on the future of coal. This conference, the rationale was to open up that debate. For the next 2 days, I think we should have frank and honest discussion on what is the future of coal, what will be the future of coal-based power plant. Thank you very much.